In this video, we're going to look at drag and drop uploading within the browser. So let's quickly demonstrate this. I've got two images here. This upload will work with multiple files as well. You can see that I've just styled a container here with a dashed edge and just some text to tell the user what to do basically. So if I drag these two files here, you can see that first of all, this style is changing. This actually is a CSS class. Well, it's a class that is basically added to this element when you drag over. So we'll be looking at them kind of things as well as actually the functionality to upload. So if I drop them on there, they have immediately been uploaded. You can see that in my uploads folder now, I've got these two files that have been uploaded, and in fact they have been output here to the page, so we can just click on them if we want. So that's the demonstration. We're going to be doing this from scratch, so we're going to be building this drop area. That won't take a moment, and then we'll be looking at actually detecting the drop of these files, and then we're going to pass them through to a PHP file script basically to be uploaded. This PHP file is going to be really small, so if you're not a PHP developer, don't worry. We're just going to be demonstrating how we upload these, but you could probably skip past that or just end the video at that point. So let's go ahead and start building this. Okay, so over in my text editor, you can see that I've got a basic document markup here. I'm also linking in this global.css style sheet, and I've just set the font body to Arial and a sans serif fallback. But obviously, depending on where you're building this, this is going to be different for you. So let's build the markup that we're going to need here. The first thing we want to create is the actual drop zone, and this is just going to be a div element here. We're going to give it a class which we're going to use to style it, so we'll just call this drop zone, and we'll also give this an ID just so we can easily target this with JavaScript. We'll also call this drop zone, and let's add some text in here, drop files here to upload. Okay, so once files have been uploaded, we want a container to be able to output these in. So I'm just going to create a div with just an ID. We're going to target this with JavaScript as well, and that's uploads. That's a moment ago when you saw me drop them in, the file names that actually appeared. So let's style this in the browser just to get the effect that we're looking for very quick, and then we'll go on to the JavaScript side of things. So at the moment, we can see that we just have this in the browser, so it doesn't look very good. So over in global.css, let's actually style this for the drop zone. So we target, obviously, the drop zone class. We're going to set a width of 300 pixels and a height of 300 pixels as well. We're also going to set a border to 2 pixels, dashed as we've already seen, and we'll do this as a sort of grey colour. We'll set the colour to the same as the border, and we will also set the line height to 300 pixels. This will just mean that the text will sit in the centre, and we'll also set the text aligned to centre as well. So this is sort of vertically aligning it if you like, and this is horizontally aligning it. You may choose to do this differently. So that's the basic drop zone, nothing really special there. What we also want though is we want to chain a class on here, because with JavaScript we're going to be adding a class which will change the border color and the color. That's when you saw me drag over it. So let's say drop zone and drag over, and let's set the border color to black. Black. And let's set the color of this to black as well. So to black. So the text goes black as well. Okay, so now let's go over to index.html and let's start writing out the code that we need here. So the idea behind drag and drop is we basically need to target this drop zone, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use a series of event handlers. We're going to use onDrop, on drag over, and on drag leave. On drag over and on drag leave are basically, their job is just to change the class when we drag over it, and on drop is actually going to send the files that we've dropped over, and then it will send them via an AJAX request to our PHP file. So let's look at the basics of this first, just so we can ease our way into it. So I'm going to create a closure here. So this is just basically going to run when the page does, so let's just test this out. And we'll bring up our console anyway, because that's going to be really useful when we're sort of outputting things to well, that we drop onto here. So everything's fine here. Let's start to create our drop zone selector. This is going to be document.getElement by ID, because we obviously need to get this by the ID that we've given the drop zone. In this case, it's just drop zone. So we now have this selected, so we can start to add event handlers to this and whatever we want to do. So let's do that now for the actual dragging over of this, and we'll change the class. So we're just going to say drop zone dot on drag over, and this is going to be a function, fairly straightforward. Now we're going to return false here because later on we'll see that if we don't return false, what's going to happen is this is actually going to not break, but it won't work as well as we hoped. So after you finish writing the code, remove this and see the effect. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to say this, which obviously refers to the drop zone, and I'm going to change the class name to drop zone. We've already got that class on there, but we're also then going to add the drag over class that we created in here. So what that's now going to do is when we drop some files over, so let's go to here, you can see, or when we drag some files over, this class basically changes. So now that we've got that, we need to handle the opposite. So we just say drop zone dot on drag leave, and we do the same. We return false here, and we want to say this dot class name. So we set the class name property just back to drop zone. So let's test this out. There we go. So we've got that nice effect now. Just signifies to the user that something has been successfully dragged on and it's sort of waiting for it to be uploaded. Now we've also got on drop. So we're going to create the on drop event handler, and then we'll see what we can extract from this event. So drop zone.on drop, and this is going to be a function. So in fact, let's just end these with semicolons. So the first thing we want to do is an argument E. This is the event, and we want to prevent the default behavior that the browser would normally take. So what we can see here now is when we actually drop something onto it, nothing happens. Now, if we didn't have this functionality here, let's just get rid of that. You can see that just opens the file in the browser. That's not what we're after. We don't want that to happen. So we need to prevent the default behavior on this event. And that's really, really important. Now, what we also want to do is we want to set the class name back to just drop zone, because when we're hovered over, the class name will be drop zone drag over. So now what's going to happen is when let's just get our files up. When we drop, let's just refresh that. When we drop this over, then the class goes back to normal. So then we can just start doing all the fun stuff like uploading. So now we want to call the upload function, which we haven't built yet. We'll be doing this in a moment. But we need to know how to pass the files through to this. So let's first of all do some console logging on the event. Now the event has a data transfer object, so we'll see this in just a moment. So inside of here we've got this data transfer or property here with this clipboard object inside of it. So we know that the data transfer basically contains what we need to extract with the files. So let's do this. So we'll do e.data transfer. So that's outputting that clipboard object. Let's do the same again. Let's refresh and drag a file over. So now we've got this clipboard object here, and we can start to see that we've got files, which is a file list object, which is perfect. This is what we need to extract from. So let's do a console log on files. So it's .files now. And we'll actually now be able to see the files that we drag. So let's drag 2 over, and you can see that we've got a length of 2, which we can use to check file count if we wanted to. We've got a 0 indexed array here, so we've got a first one, which is a file. It gives us all the information about the file, css3.png, and this one is HTML5.png. We've got the type, the size, etc., etc. So we've got the information here that we need. Now this isn't quite enough to pass this along to our upload.php file. Now let's change this console log to the upload function, and let's create this function up here. So this function is going to take some files. So if we do a console log on files just to check that this works. There, so it basically does the same thing. It just passes it through to upload. So we're separating this. Now we need to here create a form data object. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to append a list of files, or an array of files if you like, through to this, or to this, and then we pass this via an AJAX request to upload.php. Now it sounds more complicated than it is if you've not dealt with AJAX before, but if you have, this will be very, very straightforward to you. So we're going to create a new variable called form data, and this is going to be a new form data object. So we also want to, if we just comma separate these, we also want to store an XHR, XML HTTP request. We'll just store this in a variable called XHR. So we're going to say new XML HTTP request. This is what allows us to open a request to upload.php, which we have here, and then actually send some data through to it. And I also want to store a variable x because we're going to be looping here. So let's do a for loop, and let's say for x equals 0, so we'll initiate this, then we'll do our comparison. So while x is less than files.length. Remember earlier in the browser we saw that we had this length property, so we can actually loop on this, and we want to say x is x plus 1. So now this for loop is going to loop for every file that we've dragged onto that drop zone. So we can append to form data. Remember the form data object we created up here. So we can use the append method here to append on files. Now, because we're dealing with multiple files, we need to include these double square brackets here. And then we want to say files x. So remember, files is what we pass through. For each loop, we're appending each of them files onto here. So there we go. That's basically it. So let's do let's open this request. So we say xhr.open. We want to open this as a post request, and we want to open to upload.php. And we want to then send this request, and now we choose what data we want to send along with this request. In this case, it's form data. So let's check this out in our network tab. We will just open this here, and we will drag this over. So you can see now upload.php has been hit. We obviously don't get a response because we've got nothing in this page at all yet. This isn't actually handling our file uploads, but we know the AJAX request was successful. So we need to know when this AJAX request has been successful. So we use the onload event handler. So now what we want to do is we want to parse the data that comes through from this request, because what we're going to be doing is, and this is entirely dependent on how your application is going to work, upload.php in our case is going to output a JSON string with the successfully uploaded files. And this can be done in any language because any language will support JSON parsing and stringifying. So let's do this by storing a variable called data, and this is going to be this.response text. So this basically is whatever comes back from our AJAX request. So let's console log data, and then we'll look at doing an example output in here. So let's create some PHP tags, and let's just echo out hello. So what we should now see is from this request, response text should now contain the string hello, and we'll console log that based on this request. So let's do this now. And we should see in the console, if we just bring this up here, hello. So we've now got that. We know that that works. Perfect. So now what we can do is start to actually get serious about actually uploading these files. So let's handle that before we do anything else. In fact, we'll continue to console log the data just so we can keep an eye on this. So passing a form data or passing this form data through to our PHP file basically means we can pick this up. And like I said, we're going to output this as JSON. So let's change the header or the content type with the header function, because we want to output this as content type application JSON. So now let's store our uploaded files in an array. And the first thing we want to do is check if files file, we called it, name 0 isn't empty. So if that's the case, we can echo out, I don't know, we'll just echo OK. So what's going to happen now is if we go to upload.php, this won't say OK. So it's not allowing us to actually process anything unless we actually send form data. Now when I do that, you can see we get OK output in the console. So this check's working, very, very basic. Let's just quickly loop through these. So this is essentially looping through all of the files that we've dragged onto this and those that have been sent through via the AJAX request. Now, bear in mind here, I'm not enforcing any security at all. This is really important. Do not copy this and use it for production. It's just an example. We don't want to spend too long doing this. So as a warning to anyone that is working with PHP, do not use this publicly. Please make sure you review and check the security. So, or add the security rather. So we're going to be looping through file. I should have really called this files because technically we will have more than one file at some point. So I'm going to loop through. I'm going to take a position. This is the index of it and the name of the file as well. So now what we're going to get here is for each one, we're going to get the file that's been output. So let's, or uploaded. So let's echo the name here and put a BR on the end and we will see this. So we've got CSS3, a BR, HTML, PNG, and a BR. So we know that this is now looping through the files that we've uploaded successfully. So within an if statement, I'm going to use the move uploaded file function in PHP, which obviously takes the temporary file name of a file and goes ahead and bungs it in a destination. So we use files, file, then we need to access the TMP name array, and that's at the position that we're currently at in this loop. So it's a little bit complicated just because of the way that PHP gives us this array, but not to worry. We want to put these uploaded files in uploads/name. So again, you wouldn't normally do this because you're just uploading files willy-nilly into the uploads directory and they'll be overwritten if they contain the same name. So again, with no security, we are now going to say uploaded and we're going to append to this array. So if the file upload was successful, we're going to create an array with a name key, and this is going to be the name of the file. And we're also then going to pass a file key, and this is just going to be uploads/name. And that's just so that in JavaScript we can link this to the file that we upload. So you may use this for your purpose or not. So getting rid of these line breaks, let's now echo JSON encode, which is basically going to stringify this array, this uploaded array, and we'll then get a JSON string of the successfully uploaded files, which we can then easily parse in JavaScript and use to output. So let's refresh here and let's copy these over, and you can now see we've got a JSON string of the successfully uploaded files, in this case CSS3.png and HTML5.png, and if we take a look inside our uploads directory, they have indeed uploaded. Let's remove them and we will start again. So let's now, we don't need this anymore, we've done the sort of server-side processing of this. Let's use the JSON or global JSON object to parse this response. All this is going to do is it's going to basically turn it into a JavaScript object that we can use, iterate through whatever we want to do. So let's continue, to log console data. And we will try this again. In fact, we'll just keep uploading these. So we've now got an object or two objects. So the first object is the file and name. Remember, we did this in PHP. We output the file and the name, and the second here as well. So we can now loop through these to actually output what we need. So let's do this now quickly. I suppose we can cut this off to a separate function just so we can keep things separate here. So let's create a function called display uploads and pass the data through to it. And we will create this up here. So again, this functionality, Again, this functionality can be really whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. This could, I don't know, put it in a nice looking list, but in this case we're not going to bother. So I'm going to create a selector for the uploads area that we created up here. Remember, we can get that by the uploads ID. So we say get element by ID, uploads. Perfect. We also want to store the sort of anchor variable, which is going to, for each loop, be our new created A element, so our anchor, and also an X, because we're going to be using this variable down here to loop. So we create another for loop, and we want to set X to 0, and we want X to be, or while X is equal to less than, or, while X is less than data length, and then we obviously want to increment X. So this now is going to loop for each of the pieces of data or the objects that were sent back via this response text. So we're just passing this off to do different jobs, basically. So inside of here, we want to set the anchor variable, which remember we created up here. This is going to be document.createElements. This time we're actually creating an element, and we want to give this a tag name. In this case, it's just A. Now we want to set the href to data X. Remember, within the object we inspected a moment ago, this has an object, so it's a position X, so at the position that we're looping at, dot file. So this is essentially accessing what we did inside of upload.php, this. So now that we've done that, we want to set the inner text to data x.name, so we're doing exactly the same thing. And bear in mind, just as a side note, we're doing all of this inside of this main file. You would have this in some kind of reusable functionality in another external file, just worth pointing out. So now for uploads, which we've already selected up here, we want to append a child element, and that child element is going to be the anchor that we create for each of these loops. And that's it. That's it. That's all the code. So now what's going to happen is we already know that the upload works, but when we drag these over, it should. Okay, so I've just spotted this. Let's just change that back. Okay, so now what we can do is head over to our page and actually try and upload stuff. So we should now see the files upload into the uploads directory, as we've already seen, and we'll see the anchors created and added to that uploads element. And there we are. So we've got the two uploaded, we've got the hrefs in there, and obviously the inner text. And when we click on them, we see the actual file. So that's how we do drag and drop uploading. Now, this won't work for all browsers, so it's a good idea to start checking for support and providing suitable fallbacks like just normal form elements. So that's just something to bear in mind.